Hi, my name's Ian Ward. I'm a product manager at MongoDB, and I focus on the Realm SDKs, our client-side libraries for storing and querying data, as well as our Realm Sync product, a service that lives on MongoDB Realm, our serverless platform that allows you to synchronize documents on MongoDB Atlas with objects on the Realm SDKs. And so in this booth demo, I'm going to focus mainly on the Realm Sync service. And what I'm going to do is I'll go through a couple slides to set the stage, and then I'll walk through a demonstration of the product. So we'll start off with what problem we're trying to solve. And so this flow diagram should be familiar to anyone who's built a mobile application, is that you start in the top left with a native object. All mobile apps are built on the object-oriented paradigm. So you save data into an object field. If you want to persist that data on the mobile device, you then need to store it in SQLite, which is the foundational library that's a mobile database used on mobile applications, for building mobile applications. And this is what powers Core Data on iOS or Room on Android. Then if you want to send it across the network, you then need to take that data and serialize it into JSON. You then need to write all of your networking code to go to the backend to send that data to the backend. You have to handle all of the failure cases and exception handling. So what happens if you time out? What happens if you get malformed JSON? And so on and so forth. And that leads to a lot of code you need to write and maintain and debug. Then on the back end, you need to stand up a web server, expose an endpoint to receive that JSON. You then need to deserialize that JSON, throw it into a message queue, and then from there, you'll have to transform it again and maybe store it into a different database. And then if you want to push data down to the mobile device, you'll then likely integrate with some sort of push service. From there, the device gets notified, will then query to receive JSON information, and then need to deserialize it and do the whole process in reverse. And so a lot of this is something that a mobile architect will need to implement, this kind of networking stack, this networking layer, but it doesn't add any unique differentiating value to your application. You should be focused on building a great user experience and focused on writing the best business logic code that you can. And so what Realm Sync says is that leave this to us. Leave the plumbing to us, because it's not adding any unique value. And if you do this, you can focus on building that great 5-star mobile application review, right? And so with this, we have Realm Sync. There is kind of two pieces of this. There's the mobile side, which allows you to store data locally on the hard drive. You can query it, you can mutate it, and it's an object-oriented database, so it naturally integrates with the way that mobile developers think and program. And with that, we have any data that's stored in the Realm SDK in a background thread. We have a sync thread context, which will try and connect to the server side. And if it connects, it'll send any operations across the wire to the server side, translate them into MongoDB documents automatically for you. And it's a bi-directional sync as well. So any data that's inserted into MongoDB that is part of the sync collection will automatically get replicated down to the mobile device. And part of building an offline first application, so an application where it does not matter if you are offline or online, you can still use the mobile application, is that you may have clients that are sharing the same state, but they may go offline at different time periods, and they may be changing or mutating that state while they're offline and then coming back online at different periods. This is where conflicts occur. And so with Realm Sync, we have a conflict resolution algorithm that comes out of the box and makes sure that all clients that are sharing the same state resolve deterministically to the same end state. And so you might be thinking, what is the Realm SDK? This is a free and open source mobile database. It is an alternative to Core Data or Room, which I mentioned before. It is widely popular. You probably have dozens of mobile applications on your phone today that are powered using Realm. Over 100,000 developers build with it every month, 250,000 build with it every quarter, and we have support for a wide range of SDKs that are common in mobile development. So for Android, we have Java and Kotlin. For iOS, we have Objective-C and Swift. And for JavaScript, we have React Native, and using C# in the .NET framework, we also have Xamarin. And you can also use these SDKs to build desktop applications as well. So a .NET Core application if you're on a Windows device. Or we also support the Node environment for JavaScript, so you can build an Electron app. We also support Raspberry Pis on JavaScript, so you had an IoT application, you could store it locally. And so you may be thinking, how does this work? I might have, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of mobile devices all connecting to the same MongoDB Atlas cluster. How do I segment that data so that only certain users see the data that's intended for them? And so the way we do this is what's known as a partition key. And so a partition key is a field that you specify on the document, and each unique value of that partition key is what segments and compartmentalizes the documents that are intended for that user. So on the left here, the mobile device boots up, it sends to the sync server, it says, give me all documents where partition key value realm_ID equals Ian Ward. Right? And what happens there is the sync service receives that. It then runs and translates that into a query that grabs the documents of MongoDB Atlas, transforms them into Realm objects, and then sends that data down to the client. And this partition key, it could be any field. It doesn't have to be partition key or Realm ID. It could be driver ID. It could be user ID. It could be store ID. You can pick whatever field is relevant for your use case. And so these different values correspond to different partitions. So each client gets its own view of the synced data that's on MongoDB Atlas. So in the red there, I have a partition key value of Eric. Let's say he gets 100 documents out of this collection of 1 million, and they get sent down to that client. And then on the bottom there in blue, I have a partition key value of Ian, and that device only sees a different set of documents that have that field with the value set as Ian. So if we look at a client read is after the initial synchronization of the data for the partition, a MongoDB driver or some sort of trigger or function could insert data that matches that partition into MongoDB Atlas. And what happens there is the sync server picks that up via the change stream and will translate that change into a Realm operation, which then gets sent down to the sync client, written to disk first, and then we have a notification API as part of the Realm SDK that you can then update the UI or call some business logic if you wanted to. From there, the reverse, if a client makes a write on the mobile device, it first writes and commits it to disk, and then in a background thread, it gets the operation, keeps a queue of those operations, sends them to the sync server. The sync server receives that, translates it into an MQL command, and writes that data to Atlas. And so you can also share data between clients, right? If two clients log in and they both send the same partition key value, they will both get the same data. And so you can see here, partition key value is Ian. Both of those will receive the same data. They could have different logins or they could be the same login, right? So you might have an iPad and an Android phone, but you have the same login, so you get the same data. Or you can use our permissions service to say this particular store partition, store 1235, is allowed for this group of users. And so any user that is part of that group will be able to open that realm and sync that data. And of course, these different clients can go offline. And when they go offline, the Realm SDK will keep a queue of all of the operations that the user is performing while they're offline. And when they come back online, it'll send those operations to the sync service. The sync service will merge those conflicts and then send the operations down to each of those clients so that they merge deterministically to the same end state, as well as the same state that is on Atlas. Okay, so let's go through a demo and let's set up Realm Sync and run through some tutorials and show some syncing. So the first step here is you're going to go to cloud.mongodb.com. You're going to log in and you're going to be taken to the blank cluster slate. So the first thing you need to do when setting up a Realm Sync app is you need to build a cluster. So I'm going to say build cluster, create a cluster. I'm just going to use the defaults here. We'll do AWS, US East 1. It's an M10. It's on 4.4. Realm Sync works on 4.4 and above. And I will name it something. Name it Task Tracker, because that's the name of our tutorial app. And I will go create cluster, and we will just wait for this to spin up. Okay, now my cluster is up. Next thing I need to do is create my Realm app. I click this tab in the middle here that says Realm. I'm just going to use the defaults here, and it's already connected to my Task Tracker cluster. I'm going to also name this Task Tracker for the Realm app name. I'll create that application. Don't need to go through the application guide because I'm going to show you just how quickly it is to set up a syncing mobile application. There's two things you need to do. One is authentication, so we need to enable email password. I'm going to click this enabled on. I'm automatically going to confirm users, and then it also wants me to specify a password function, password reset function. We're just going to say run a password reset function, and we're just going to select a default function here just so it allows me to save it. It's not going to do anything because this is just a demo. So save that draft. Next thing I need to do is set up sync. So I click sync on the left here. On the left here, this is for if you already have existing data in Atlas. An important part of sync is setting up the syncing schema. So this is a matching schema between your mobile devices, object class schema, and then the structure of your documents in Atlas. And the mobile object schema can be a subset of the collections that you have in Atlas, and it can be a subset of the fields that you have as is stored in documents in Atlas. For this demo though, and for if you're coming from this from a mobile application development background, you can define your schema, your syncing schema in mobile application code, and then the syncing schema will automatically derive from that. So that's what I'm going to do here called development mode. I'll say define data models. I'll select the Atlas cluster I'm using for sync. I'm going to specify a partition key field. Just call it partition. It'll be a string field and will be required. And then I'll just create a database name here, my database. And then I'll turn dev mode on. And that's it. And then we just need to save this and deploy. So we review, draft, and deploy. And we click deploy. Great. Okay, so now let's get a tutorial app and start syncing some data. So I'll go to docs.mongodb.com/realm. I'll click tutorial, and I'm going to start with Android here. So I'll click Android with Kotlin. This is a full-length tutorial that shows you how to build the app using code snippets. We're not going to step through it that way. What we'll do is we'll just clone the final app from GitHub, run it, and then start syncing some data. So I will clone this. And then important piece I'm going to need here is this Realm app ID right here. I'm going to input this into each one of my tutorial apps. And from there, that's how it'll know which app I'm connecting with on the server side. So open Realm Studio, Android Studio. And I'll open my tutorial I just cloned. Okay, it looks like the Gradle sync just completed, so I have my project structure here. I'm going to open this build.gradle file, and here's where I put in that Realm app ID. Your app ID here. I will just put it in here. save, select a Android device that I want to build with, build the app. Okay, now that my Android app is built and deployed, I'm going to create a new user. I'm going to do Andy for Android. Create the account. Now this is going to create a partition that's unique for this user's ID, and this user ID is automatically created when they sign in and create an account. So I'll click My Project. This will be my partition, and I'll add some tasks. So what's happening here is I'm creating task objects. They are first getting written to the Realm database that's local to this mobile device, this emulator, and then it's automatically syncing to the backend Atlas cluster as well and translated as documents. And we'll take a look at those documents in just a second here. Okay, so this looks like I've added 3 tasks. Great. Now let's go and run another tutorial. So I'll go back to the docs and I'll go with Xamarin here. So I'll do the same exact thing. I'll copy it in GitHub. I'll clone the repository and I'll open up Visual Studio. I'll open up this tutorial that I just cloned. Okay, now it is compiled and deployed to my Android, this Xamarin application. I'm gonna log in a new user, so they're gonna get a separate partition and have a different subset of documents they're gonna view. Create new account. It's gonna log me in here, create a new partition for me. It's gonna show me an error here that says that a backend function is missing. That's totally fine. The normal course of this tutorial has a back-end component where you actually set up a more in-depth custom user data and a authentication trigger, as well as a function for doing permissions. This is so that different users can actually share their partitions with other users. This is a little bit more in-depth. I just wanted to quickly run through and show you how you can get set up with Realm Sync very quickly and easily and have just a per user partition, but I definitely recommend running through the full-blown tutorial to kind of get a sense of how easy it is to set up permissions and tie that with authentication. And these are the kind of things that you'll definitely be doing for a production application. Okay, so I just set up 3 different tasks in the Xamarin application with my username as Zemi. I'm going to save this here. This has already synced to Atlas. I'm going to go back to my Android application here. And I'm actually going to exit out of this Visual Studio because I need the memory so I can run more tutorials. Okay, so let's do our last tutorial here, which is going to be iOS. So I'm going to go to Swift, iOS with Swift. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to clone it on GitHub. And then we're going to build the project. Okay, so iOS is a little bit different in that I need to do a pod install. So it uses CocoaPods to install the Realm Swift library into the tutorial mobile application, Swift application. You don't have to use CocoaPods. This tutorial was just created a while ago. Now we have full SPM support or Swift Package Manager, and you can actually use that to install the Realm Swift SDK. And probably that's going to be our recommendation going forward because Swift Package Manager is from Apple and fully vetted from them, whereas CocoaPods was a third-party library. Okay, so I'll do pod install repo update. Okay, it's installed. So now let's open up that workspace. Cool, opens up Xcode right there for me. I'll go into scene delegate, and this is where I will set up my app ID again. Let's go get that. Save it. I'm going to select iPhone 12. And I'll build. Okay, now that my iOS app is built and deployed, I'm going to log in here, create a new user that will get a new partition. I'll do Ian for iOS. I'll sign up. I'll select my project. And I'll add some tasks. Okay, so now I have my own separate partition with 3 iOS tasks. So now let's take a look at how this data has synced to the back end. If I go back to my cloud dashboard, I'll click on Atlas. You can kind of see here, you can see actually the writes and reads that have been coming through. And there was just a big spike in writes, so hopefully the documents are there. Sometimes the collection viewer has a little bit of a lag, but it should at least have picked up a few of them. Oh, and they're all there here. So you can see here the partition this is for the Android partition with this user ID. And then down here I have the Xamarin partition with a different user ID. And then the iOS one down here. And so what I can do here is I can actually clone a document and I'll send this to the Android partition. So I'll say Android 4, and I'll add that. And if I open up my Android app, you can see it pops up right there. I'll do the same thing with iOS. At iOS 4, insert that document, and it pops right up. And I can also put this as in progress, iOS 4, and if I refresh the data here, you can see it's now set to in progress. I can also edit this, so I can do sub-document edits, iOS 4 edit, update that, go back to my simulator, you can see it pops up right here. So that's great. So now we have a shared collection in MongoDB. So this is all the tasks collection, but there's 3 separate partitions within it, each going to a separate mobile device, and that's all based off the user login. What I'm actually going to do here is I'll bring up the Android. I'm actually going to log out of Ian, right? And now what I'll do is I'll log in as Andy. And you can see it pops right up with the different set of data. And if I add one here, it shows up on the other simulator. First it goes to the cloud. If I add one over here, it shows up on the other side. Now let's go offline. So now I'm offline. What I'll do is I'll add Android 7 over here. Doesn't show up on the other side. I'll also add Android 8 over here. And then I'll delete some. I'll delete this one over here, Android 1. I'll delete Android 2 from over here. I will mark this one. Actually, I'll delete Android 3. And then I'll mark this as complete for Android 3. And it's important to know that in our conflict resolution rules, delete always wins. So if you're going to delete an object, that will always override any update later on. So knowing that, you can take that into account when you design your application code. If you don't want to actually delete any data, you can kind of do a soft delete and move it down in a list and iterate the index. There's strategies around that. So now I can reconnect to the Wi-Fi and they've stored their operations locally. And as it reconnects, it'll send those operations to the back end and then merge the changes. And these devices should come back to the same state. Of course, I need to actually connect to the Wi-Fi here. There we go, it's starting to connect. Ooh. And there we go. Now we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And so now you can see they each had a different view of the data. They were offline, well, they had the same view of the data when they started. They went offline, they made different changes. They came back online and it merged to the same end state. And with lists, it's very important to maintain that order. And you can see here, it did. So to close up here, I hope you enjoyed this bit of explanation about Realm Sync and a demo. And so if you'd like to get started, you can go to our documentation, docs.mongodb.com/realm. There's the tutorials there. There's a bunch of more explanations for things that you might have had questions on. But of course, if you have a question, you can go to forums.realm.io. We monitor that regularly. Ask your question. We will get you an answer. And we also have a user group for Realm. So you can go to live.mongodb.com, sign up for the Realm Global Community. Once or twice a month, we hold user group meetups, and we will do different presentations on best practices for React Native, or what is SwiftUI and how best to use it with navigation. So if you have topics or questions or you're just getting new into mobile development, it's a great resource, and you'll be talking directly with our engineers who are working on these SDKs. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you give it a try. Thank you. Bye.